I want to welcome you to this final webinar of the 2022 Behavioral Science Week. It has been an amazing week, I think, and I hope you will enjoy this webinar on behavioral science to enhance UN integration and collaboration, co-hosted by EOSG and UNDP. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Michael Lund, and I lead the Knowledge, Innovation and Learning portfolio in the Crisis Bureau in UNDP, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Opening remarks will be delivered by Ayaka Suzuki, who we have with us. She's Director of the Strategic Planning and Monitoring Unit in the Executive Office of the Secretary General. And it was her and her shop that guided the whole integration review that was authored by Jordan Ryan. So there's really nobody better to get us started off than Ayaka here today. Next, we will hear from Saugata Datta, who is the Managing Director in Ideas 42. And Ideas 42 is our partner on the behavior elements of the integration review. Then for the main thing is Faraz Haji, who is the Senior Associate in Ideas 42 and the Chief Solution Designer, who will present the work we've been doing and the next steps. I will provide a few comments on my observations from working with this, my experience with Ideas 42, and then we should have 15 to 20 minutes left for Q&A. I'll kindly ask you to use the Q&A function to ask your question, and we'll be monitoring it. You can also raise your hand, and Saha will allow you, who is here to help with the technical elements of it, will allow you to ask the question directly. Just before giving the floor to Ayaka, I wanna launch a quick poll that I hope you can answer. You can see it here. How important do you think it is to address the behavioral challenges to achieve successful integration? Okay, we have almost have everybody responding. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's I'm ending the poll, and you can see here the results. So obviously this poll is not very scientific, giving the sample, which is you people who are interested in this topic, but I still think that it gives a little bit of a picture of how important it is to look at behavioral aspects of integration. That has been really an area that's been overlooked. Okay, without further ado, please let me give the floor to Ayaka to get us started in earnest. Thank you. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Very happy to be joining you in this panel. And you're right, we had a great behavioral science week. And if you missed many of the very, very exciting panels, please check the recordings. I think the recordings are already available. So I don't know, Michael, if you can get the link in the chat. So I think, as the poll just suggested, the people, the colleagues who joined this panel, this session, already are aware and are convinced that behavioral science is an important tool for the UN to progress on our mandate and to become more efficient, innovative, and relevant in the 21st century. So I'm really preaching to the choir here. I just wanted to give you, to remind you all, in case you may not have known, that Secretary General issued his guidance on behavioral science last year. That was actually the key flagship event of last year's Behavioral Science Week. And this year, we actually issued the implementation guide. And I just wanted to put that in the context, because the way we see it, behavioral science fits into what the Secretary General calls UN 2.0. And what it is, and we have a little visual here, what it is that it is a vision to transform the United Nations into an organization that is fit for purpose to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Often, many of us are still using tools that were developed in the 19th century, but clearly we need to upgrade our skills and do things differently, and we need to be more nimble, dynamic, and evolved to address challenges and issues that are becoming more and more complex by the day. I mean, one thing for sure that I think that all of you have been aware of is that the planetary crisis that we're facing is multidimensional. Everything is interlinked. So it really is the case that we need to do things differently and just become much more modernized the way we approach things. So in recognition of this and realizing how important behavioral science is to advancing one of the key priorities of the Secretary General, which is to promote more integrated, cross-pillar, joined-up approaches. The 2020 review of UN integration, which Michael referred to at the beginning of this this panel discussion, contained a substantial behavioral insights component, which luckily for us was led by Behavioral Insights team, which is represented today in this panel, Ideas 42. It was very great to work with these behavioral scientists throughout the process, and many of us, including myself, are new to this. So why is integration important? I mean, it is important because every dollar out of $2 that we spend as the United Nations is in these fragile, complex settings. And if we're working cross purposes and not joined up, we will not be effective. And that's very, very clear. So it is a key priority of the Secretary General. It is critical for the credibility and effectiveness of the United Nations, in particular, to be able to deliver for the people that we serve. So I think that, I hope that most of you have had a chance to read this review. But what it was very interesting was that the review highlighted that there are many behavioral barriers that impede effective collaboration and effective integration. And so therefore it highlighted some behavioral solutions and recommendations to mitigate these barriers, which colleagues from Ideas 42 will share in detail after my remarks. So, you know, we've been trying to implement the review recommendations for the past year, and throughout this process, senior leaders have emphasized time and time again the need for mutual respect, accountability, and positive role modeling to ensure that structural improvements are backed by necessary collaborative behaviors. So I think that this conversation that we will have in this session, and I really hope that it'll be interactive, please do use the chat and Q&A functions to engage with the panelists. I hope that this will be yet another kind of necessary injection to push forward the agenda of integration, not for the sake of integration, clearly, but for better results. So with that, thank you so much, Michael. I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Ayaka. Thanks for getting us started and putting it in the bigger perspective of behavioral science as part of the vision of the Secretary General for a reformed and 21st century fit United Nations, and how important integration is for the work that the UN does in order to deliver in these very complicated settings that we operate in. Salgato, over to you for a few words. Salgato is the Managing Director of Ideas 42, and we'll just share a few thoughts on this work that we've been doing. So, Salgato, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for this opportunity to talk about our work together under the aegis of the integration review. This is really exciting work. While behavioral science has been applied to many different areas, there have been relatively few attempts to deploy it in a nuanced way in aid of key organizational goals within complex organization. In that sense, the work that we've all been doing with colleagues at UNDP on behalf of the broader UN system on the behavioral aspects of integration in the UN is pioneering, both for international organizations, but also, I think, for behavioral science itself. So you'll be hearing from Faraz and Michael about the details of this work, but I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the Integration Review team and senior management of the UN for this opportunity to dig into a complex and important issue. And really, this is one of the most interesting pieces of work we've been involved in recently. In closing, I should mention that this work is already leading to further applications of behavioral science to complex issues within the UN system. We are shortly commencing a project inspired very much by this one on driving an innovation mindset at the FAO, at the Food and Agriculture Organization. So over to you, Michael, for the rest of the proceedings. Thank you.
Thanks, Elgato. And just quickly passing it over to Faraz, our chief designer, who will give us the main presentation of the work done so far and the way forward. So please share your presentation, Faraz, and let's start.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, we see it's perfect.
Great, so I'll jump right in. We've divided this presentation into 4 sections. I'll start out by explaining how behavior is central to successful integration. Then I'll discuss the behaviorally informed recommendations we made as part of the integration review last year, before going into more detail about how we approach the process of designing behavioral solutions to be implemented in integrated settings. And finally, I'll briefly touch on the next steps that we have planned. So I want to start by talking about the role of behavior in integration, because integration is complex, and usually when we've thought about it in the past, we've thought about it in terms of the various systems and structures that are required for successful integration, which in turn is intended to ensure the consolidation of peace outcomes. And what was new about last year's integration review was that it also looked at the behaviors required of key actors for successful integration. This includes senior leaders, managers, planners and coordination teams, as well as headquarters leadership and non-leadership staff, who all need to behave in certain ways for integration to succeed. So to start off, we reviewed policy documents, conducted a survey, and participated in most of the stakeholder interviews and focus group discussions conducted by the integration review to really try and understand who's involved in integration, what are the duties and responsibilities they have that are critical to integration, and then what does it require to fulfill those duties and responsibilities, so that we could begin to identify the specific actions and behaviors that might be required, but that people might be struggling with. Having collected that data, we began to look for clues to help us identify the behavioral barriers that might prevent motivated, capable people from doing things that would be conducive to successful integration. For example, we found a recurring theme that integration-related activities take up a lot of time, and that people are tired and aren't able to pay much attention to these time-consuming tasks. So in this way, we identified a number of ways that key actors would need to behave. Senior leaders need to define and demonstrate commitment to integration. Managers need to identify opportunities for collaboration and then solicit buy-in for those opportunities. Planners need to build relationships proactively. Leadership at headquarters need to support dispute resolution, and non-leadership staff need to incorporate data and viewpoints into their decision-making. So in doing this, we also begin to identify where they might run into barriers. Things like feeling that their actions are unhelpful or inadequate, being put off by the perceived risks of engaging in those actions, relying too much on formal protocols, having too many options and not enough help in making decisions, and feeling like the benefits are smaller than they might really be. So moving towards the recommendations that we made, having done all of this background work really helped us to think about new ways to try and tackle this problem. So for example, we usually have the view that there's nothing wrong with IAP policy, and we focus on persuading people of the value of integration and writing lengthy policy documents and training people. But one of the things the review found is that the lengthy and complex documents like the IAP handbook can be cumbersome to use. And in fact, they might not really be much need to persuade anyone. In many interviews, people showed that they already intend to behave in ways that are critical to integration. And so for the most part, we don't need to change people's minds or attitudes. We really just need to help them take the steps that they already want to take by addressing the behavioral barriers that they experience in their day-to-day work. So the recommendations we made at the end of the integration review each followed one of 3 overarching strategies. The first of these strategies was simply to help staff make better use of the finite focus and attention that they have for making integration work. So for example, 2 of the key barriers that we identified were that UN staff don't always have the time and attention they need to dedicate to integration related tasks, and that they have too many choices and not enough guardrails for which option to select. And both of these things inhibit decision-making and action. And to address these, what we recommended was minimizing unnecessary demands on their attention, specifically by adopting solutions to free up staff time, by maybe eliminating forums and mechanisms that were duplicative or not useful, removing hurdles to collaboration, consultation and conflict management, and even just trying to simplify tasks to make them easier and quicker to do. We also had a number of solutions to operationalize our third and fourth recommendations, which were to reduce the perceived risks and highlight examples of the successes of integration. And finally, recommendations number 5 and number 6 were to deconstruct siloed identities and that prevent people from seeing themselves as all playing for the same team, and then to facilitate the formation of interpersonal relationships. So this is where the integration review concluded. We were then asked to extend our engagement to begin designing what those solutions might actually look like. So the first thing we did was to work closely with Michael and other UN colleagues to prioritize a subset of the solutions that we'd proposed based on criteria such as the impact that we felt they might have, the different people that they were likely to reach, because we wanted to ensure that we had some coverage across the different actors to tackle these issues from different angles. And then finally, our ability to actually take these solutions forward. And our goal was to figure out what these solutions could look like in a UN context and to design solutions that are both accessible and usable, and also pair well with the touch points that exist within the UN system. So to ensure that the ideas we were pursuing were fit for purpose in a UN context, we followed an iterative co-design process with our team contributing behavioral science expertise and our UN colleagues contributing their knowledge of how things are done, what tools and platforms already exist, and what design approaches might appeal to someone in an integrated UN setting. So we started out all generating ideas together and revising those ideas based on feedback, gradually building out the solutions. And currently we're preparing to bring in the final usability testing stage of development. So we're working on a number of different tools, but I want to highlight a few of them here to illustrate our multi-pronged approach to improving integration-related behaviors. So first, meetings are used pretty expensively in the UN to discuss and decide issues related to integration. Our analysis had shown that staff felt cross-pillar meetings and forums were often not flexible, inclusive, or productive enough to facilitate successful integration. And while holding meetings can seem simple, everybody does it all the time, we wanted to explore ways to make them a little bit more effective. So the first set of tools that we have is meant to help people identify problems with the way that they have structured meetings and think of ways to improve them, or to help people be strategic about how they structure new meetings that they're designing. The tools are meant to be quick and easy to read, and they break down tasks into simple steps, making them easier to think about. So for example, we have a one-page checklist to help leaders audit existing meetings and structure new meetings so that they are better suited to their purpose. It's designed to be quick and easy to read with boxes along the right-hand side highlighting common opportunities for improvement. And it also includes links at key points to some of the other resources in our packet for those people who want to do a deeper dive. We also found in our analysis that a feeling of siloed identities can prevent truly collaborative behavior. And so another document that we designed is a list of brief activities intended to prime people to collaborate by getting them to articulate their motivations at the start of a meeting or session. And if we can help people break out of their siloed identities by helping them realize they have goals in common with their colleagues in other UN entities, our hope is that we can reduce frictions that might arise in integrated processes. So meetings also often didn't seem to be facilitating true two-way communication. Many people we spoke to felt like they had been they were often spoken to, but not listened to. So next, we have a packet of tools that's intended to remind people about the principles of two-way communication at the right time, because it's often not that people don't know about these principles, but often they're just not thinking about them in the moment. So for example, we've drafted a slide that could be incorporated into the PowerPoint templates for different UN entities. And the idea is that it's easy to plug into the start of a presentation. It can be edited to modify the content for different situations. And once it's included, it would be a quick and unobtrusive reminder to people to be intentional about how they conduct themselves during the meeting. Separately, but related to this, we're also working on developing a system for collecting structured, constructive feedback about meetings from participants. And the idea is that this data can then be consulted and used to evaluate and improve meetings and forums. Another key barrier that we identified was the perception that the risks of participating in integration-associated activities sometimes appear more forbidding than they are. So we're also proposing a couple of different ways to recognize integration's champions within the UN. The idea is both to acknowledge those who are doing good, but also make their desirable behavior visible as a model for other people. So for example, one of our ideas entails hosting a week to celebrate collaboration in which participants are given a sheet of tokens like the one on the right, which they can then cut out and distribute to colleagues at other UN entities who they've collaborated with or would like to acknowledge in some way. And by doing this, for different actions that people may have taken, the people who receive the tokens will receive positive reinforcement, and the people who are giving the tokens also have a moment where they can stop and think, wow, that person really helped me out by doing that, and it creates a sense of reciprocity. So the barrier of siloed identities and a lack of understanding and appreciation for the work of other UN entities came up in a few different places in our analysis. So the final set of tools that I'll talk about is a set of activities we created to encourage staff to reflect on the objectives that they share with their counterparts at other UN entities, including by highlighting successful team building initiatives in different countries, and creating opportunities for staff to actually spend time with their counterparts at other UN entities, either on field visits or just on visiting days. So cross-filter mobility has long been an issue and was also highlighted in the general recommendations for the integration review report, along with the need for training in other entities as mandates. But true mobility is a significant challenge to achieve, and training, which although it's much easier, it can be very resource intensive. So we've developed a very simple tool to facilitate understanding and appreciation of the work of others. And the way it works is that teams can fill out a form offering to host visiting staff members for a full day, half day, or even just a 2-hour time slot. And then interested staff members from other UN entities can then sign up to be hosted in those slots. And our goal is for the exposure and gradual improvement in understanding across UN entities to help mitigate the effects of things like the fundamental attribution error, where a person might blame the behavior of another on, malice instead of being understanding of the situation that that person might be in. So just to bring it all together a little bit, I described how we identified behaviors key to integration, and then behavioral barriers that keep people from behaving in those ways. And our designs are ultimately intended to tackle each of these different barriers. We don't expect that the solutions will completely solve all of the problems. But by tackling each of these discrete barriers in small ways, our hope is that we can create an environment where it's a little bit easier, a little bit faster, and a little bit more comfortable for people to behave in the ways that integration requires. Okay, so thinking ahead to next steps, the solutions that we have currently exist as testable prototypes. They're basically advanced drafts that have gone through multiple rounds of revision to accommodate inputs from various stakeholders. And their ultimate success will depend on how much they make sense and appeal to the people we've designed them for. So the next stage of development requires the solution prototypes to undergo usability testing, in which participants interact with the solutions and attempt to use them as their intended users would in real-world settings. So participants' experiences will be recorded either through observations or through follow-up interviews or survey questionnaires. And then that data will be used to identify any changes that are required in the prototype design so that we can optimize them for use in their intended settings. The other piece that we're going to be thinking about is accessibility. So we want to be sure to design solutions that are easily discoverable by users and that pair well with the existing touchpoints that exist within the UN system so that we can be sure that they'll be used. We have some thoughts about leveraging existing trainings, guidance documents, and technology platforms for this, but those are decisions that we'll be finalizing over the summer, especially after we've conducted our usability testing. So with that, thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and I'll hand it back to Michael.
Thank you, Faraz. We have 2 questions so far. Please do use the Q&A function for additional questions, or raise your hand if you would like to ask your question directly. I will just share, before we go to the Q&A, I will just share a few observations from my side, since I was leading on behalf of the UN system, working with IDEAS 42. So when I say the UN system, is the integration working group, that's the anchor of this work. And funding for the whole work, because it costs money too, was provided by the UN Transition Project, which is a project that also incubates a lot of innovations on how we can work together in mission settings. And they have an amazing expert support on UN transition. So thank you to the project for the support to this. So some of the 4 observations I want to share from being on the UN side of this collaboration. Firstly, using behavioral analysis and a lens to the challenges of integration was really new for us and for everybody. I think we are mostly or very comfortable with pushing answers on people. We try to persuade people that they should integrate. We push policies, but we don't really take the situation that people are in that serious, and how we can make it easier for people to work. But looking at the frictions instead of looking at pushing solutions to people is a different way of doing it and removing those frictions. Secondly, I think we in our interactions we often have faced the misunderstanding that the behavioral science approach that we're using is some kind of therapy for people, and that we are trying to change people. We are not therapists, but what we are trying to do is change the context that people are operating in to make it easier for them to do what they intend to do. In this case, work in an integrated manner. So yes, it is about people, but it's also about the context that people act in. That's what we're trying to make easier. Thirdly, Faraz did talk a little bit about the process. I want to highlight the importance of co-creation here. All of this work that Faraz has been presenting has been co-created between the behavioral experts in IDEAS 42 and UN staff. Us sort of UN bureaucrats who wouldn't be able to come up with these ideas and these tools without the expertise of experts in IDEAS 42 in this work. On the other hand, IDEAS 42 wouldn't have been able to come up with these solutions without engaging with us, because we are a bit of a weird beast, and it does and whatever we come up with, whatever designs that come up, it needs to function in the context that we are in. So we had a lot of workshops to go through all of these tools with UN staff, and a shout out here to all the staff that has been part of that, because this couldn't have been done without you. Before the analytical phase, or before the design phase, IDEAS 42 was also an integral part of Jordan Ryan's team. Jordan Ryan is the lead author of the integration review and was part of all the interviews. So it was clicking already at that time, and that's a really important thing. Lastly, just to say, and maybe it's a part of an answer to one of the questions that we got, that behavioral solutions, if I can call them that, that we have designed are not the panacea to integration. It's not going to solve everything. We need the structural change, and we need good and sound policy. And sometimes I'm a little afraid that we have raised the expectations for what we can do with these tools a little bit too high. We can't change everything, but what we can do is try and make it easier for people to behave in a way that promotes integration. And then these tools are not solely are not only able to be used to promote integration. It has a broader collaborative purpose as well. And I encourage and I hope that you on this call and participants in this webinar and beyond, other UN actors will be able to use these tools for collaboration in non-mission settings. So it's not just about integration per se, but a wider set of issues that can help collaboration. So those are just a few of my observations on working on this. We have half an hour left for Q&A, so I will encourage you to raise your hand if you want to come in directly. And then I have two questions. Okay, so we have Sahar. Do you want to answer this question, or you want me to? I can provide a question on the KPIs. So the work that we are doing with the behavioral designs are not directly involved in the KPI. So we are not directly involved in it. I will say that there is a large element focusing on leadership and behaviors and leadership and changing adapting the terms of reference and the expectations of leadership teams. So indirectly we are contributing to that, but to that collaboration will be part of those measurements for staff. On whether this is going to change everything, there was a question on realizing how difficult it is, and it is very difficult, and these tools that we are proposing here are not going to be as I said, the panacea and solve everything, but it hopefully is going to help people make it easier. And this is the first time we're trying to do this, so if we can move this, if we can move the needle a little bit, and then hopefully it starts a wider range of behavioral changes that can be promoted in the field. Those are the two questions that I got in the Q&A. I know that Jordan Ryan is here too, and if it's okay, Jordan, with you, because Jordan is the lead author of the whole integration review. As you come up with more questions, participants, I might like to turn to Jordan to share a few of the reflections of the integration review and the work on the behavioral side. Is that all right with you, Jordan? Sahar, can you give? I can actually also do it. So, Jordan, you have permission to talk if you want to come in and share a few observations. Thank you.
Great. Well, first, I think it's a great presentation. Very much appreciate both Ideas 42 and you, Michael, and the team pulling together the amount of work that's been done. Clearly, Ideas 42 from the beginning participated in almost every one of the interviews, so they heard firsthand what the situation was. And I think we're able to use their behavioral insights to both reflect on reality, but also propose some possible solutions. So I think it's exciting that we've gotten to the point where it's time to actually take this to the field, see how it works, get feedback from the actual situations. So with that, I think it's going to be kind of a unique opportunity to see how these things play out, and I think will be quite important to test it out, which will be the next stage. I do think that what we heard in the review often was that it's not necessarily the policy. It really was kind of the implementation, and clearly what gets in the way of implementation are behaviors, attitudes, working through some of those areas. So I think the kind of challenge has been met by having had the opportunity to reflect quite a bit on what the problems were. And now I think it really is going to be important that this kind of dialogue with the field, with people that are actually at the cutting edge of trying to make the system more effective, trying to find ways of bridging silos, and trying to improve the understanding among all UN actors, that we are a common group committed to the values of the United Nations. And though we might be development actors or peace and security actors or humanitarians or focused on human rights, that actually by finding ways of thinking, analyzing, and even working together better, we can bring the merits of the United Nations to the problems that are just overwhelming the world today. So I think it's a very exciting time to try, under the direction of the Secretary General and the Executive Committee, really try to make sure that this work happens and happens well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for sharing that. Some of these questions are more questions are on the UN side. So I'm going to take some of it. And Ayaka, if you have a chance to, if you want to come in on some of these questions, please do so. So indeed, the UN has a very strong culture of hierarchy and need permission to act in a certain way. So what you've seen both in the tools, but also the analysis, there's a wide range of actors that are expected to work in a certain way. There's both mission leadership, there's other leaders in the field, heads of agencies, there are planners, there are staff. And what we've been trying to do is to have tools that target a variety of actors. So if for example, as Faraz was presenting the tokens idea, yes, leadership have to agree that we have a collaboration week, and there's a very simple explanation of how this would work. But then it's basically staff appreciating collaborating with other colleagues. It doesn't really need quote unquote more than that from leadership. And then we have some of the tools that is more specific, especially about running meetings, getting feedback, facilitating two-way communication, that is more targeted towards leadership. Here also, maybe also to see if we can get these tools embedded in the way that we operate. Faraz was talking about sort of a whole ecosystem of implementation, which would include how these things can be used in trainings. Our hope is that there will be some uptake in trainings that senior leadership participate in, where they are in a if you call it a safe space with colleagues, where they can try some of these things out before going live with other colleagues in the field, with country teams, and see how it works for them, how they can make it work. So to make that sort of not too make it easier for them, make it more comfortable for them to try and use this. But indeed, I mean, if senior leadership is not really willing to do any of this, then it's hard. But I would say that the signals that EOSG, not more than signals actually, Ayaka, it's more than signals you're giving. You're really engaging with heads of missions in the field to encourage them to take these things up. So there is a strong push, as you could hear from Ayaka in her opening remarks, not only for integration and behavioral recommend of these behavioral solutions, but behavioral science in general as part of the new vision of the Secretary General. So there is that very top level cover, if you will, from EOSG to do this, and I'm hoping this will help. Christophe, you asked if you can test some of these. Yes, please, especially at headquarters, we at task forces. The integration working group is going to do this themselves too. We're going to taste our own medicine as best as we can, but I would love for this to be tested with HQ task forces. So I'm going to, well, my email is straightforward, michael.lund@undp.org. I'll still put it in the chat. Reach out to me and we'll organize how we can do this. That's perfect. Ayaka, if you're, I know you have to run, if you're with us, would you be able to, there's a question in the chat to Ideas 42, but Ayaka, do you want to just come in and maybe talk a little bit about the permission and the encouragement or the accountability frameworks for leadership on integration? Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, that is still a work in progress. I mean, Michael, as you're probably aware yourself, there's ongoing discussions on that also within the integration working group as well. This is a really key piece, and there was some discussions between the leadership of the departments of Political and Peace Building Affairs and Department of Peace Operations with the Undersecretary General for Policy on how best to advance it. There are different ways of approaching it, right? So the idea now is that there will be some kind of a facilitated leadership dialogue at the level of the SR senior representative, the Secretary General, and his or her deputies, plus some key heads of agencies on the ground to discuss how the leadership at the country level is working together or not. And the idea is that they would pilot this in some key countries, and then we'll review to see how best to take this further. There was also in parallel the efforts to develop what colleagues called integration indicators to be incorporated in the scorecards of the special representatives of the Secretary General. And then I think that something similar is also being considered for the triple hats as well. So there's a number of initiatives, but you know, again, this is something that, you know, it's not something that can happen overnight because there are some institutional, you know, some groundwork that needs to be laid, etc. And so anyway, all of this to say that there are ongoing efforts, but it is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ayaka. Salgato, for us, maybe if you're looking at some of these questions, if you can bring it out to a little bit of a broader perspective with your experience of how to make things like this work in both in organizations, but also uptake with people in the real world, if you will. So over to one of you, Salgato.
Sure, I can certainly offer some reflections on that. I think there was a question about, you know, the fact that there are sort of existing approaches that people are very used to. I think Michael already alluded to that as a way of tackling issues, and sometimes these behavioral approaches can seem quite different. And I think in terms of the experience within the UN, I think we've got, you know, certainly a lot of interest and cooperation from members of the UN across different agencies, across different parts of the organization. I will, of course, acknowledge that, you know, perhaps initially when we talk to people with this lens, it isn't something that they are sort of used to, right? It isn't, you know, these are the sorts of questions perhaps even that are being asked sometimes are not sort of typical, but over time, I think with repeated interactions, people do sort of, I don't think people find it impossible to step out of the sort of framework or box that they're used to being in, and more often than not, and again, it sort of varies, you know, some people really get interested in that and then start sort of themselves asking questions of some of the processes and methods that they're used to from a different perspective. So I think that has been a key part of why this work has progressed the way it has. And I think there was also a question in there about sort of, you know, here we go again with sort of outside experts and, you know, what about the voice of people at the UN and ideas coming from there. And I mean, I can really only say that I think, as Michael, I think, alluded to in his remarks, this has been a remarkably collaborative process. I mean, for me, one of the most interesting things about this has been able to sort of, you know, look inside the workings of an organization as influential and as complex as the United Nations and be able to, you know, see the patterns and see sort of, you know, what different sorts of roles are and what is expected of them and so on. But we couldn't have done any of this really without the vast number of people within the UN system who've been so generous in speaking to us and, you know, not just speaking to us and answering our questions, but in many cases, you know, testing things out that we asked them to, coming back with very candid reflections on how they would do things differently, or why, you know, an initial idea that we had perhaps didn't make any sense at all in the UN context, and suggesting alternatives. So it has been a very collaborative process. And, you know, I don't think by any means we would say that, you know, I think both pieces of that, like Michael said, are absolutely essential, because there's no way we could have had that sort of view into the context that we got. And we were very fortunate to have that. And I think that, again, what Ayaka spoke about, which is the sort of the very high level support for looking at behavioral approaches generally within the UN. I think that sort of, someone asked the question about in an organization as hierarchical and as rule bound in the UN. And I think, well, that's where having really high level support helps, because that actually does then fall within the mental model of what people do think is important, and at least gives them the cover that they need to engage in this process. So I think that's been wonderful. But those are my thoughts. Faraz, Michael, if you have more.
Sure, I'm happy to chime in, and I guess echo a little bit of what people have already said. But you know, we started out this process, and you know, we had to work very closely with our colleagues at the UN, because there's many aspects of approaching this work and doing these tasks that you know just sometimes don't work the way that you think they will, or there's a lot of complications and things involved in actually doing these. And so it was incredibly useful for us to have this team of UN staff members who all were sort of intimately familiar with you know, processes and situations in the field settings that we were designing these some of these tools for, to really be able to say, you know, this is what you should try to do. You know, this idea won't work, that idea is better, and sort of brainstorm with us and sort of revise the designs over time to try and come up with something that, you know, would appeal to people, wouldn't turn people off, you know, might be usable, might slot in well with the things that they're already doing or that are already going on in the UN context. And so, you know, and I think, you know, our designs that we have ended up with are one way of achieving these things, and we hope that they'll be a useful example and a useful thing. But I also think that having worked closely with so many people now within the UN, you know, there's probably more people who can sort of look at some of these things and say, you know, here's what else that we could do, and here are other things that we would like to do. And so, you know, my hope is that, you know, these tools sort of are a starting point for future work that Michael and people like him end up doing within these contexts to really try and address some of the behavioral barriers that might be just holding up things that the UN is trying to do. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Faraz. So maybe there's some questions on the, well, I think maybe we can highlight where we are with the process, might answer some of it. So what we've been doing is through these workshops with staff, both from the field and from headquarters, we've done, this is like alpha testing, if you will. We've done the first testing of the different tools. Now we'll do the beta testing, the actual user testing. And the first time we'll do that will be in Somalia, in the context of the UNCT retreat later this month, where we're working with the team there on how to build in some of these tools into the retreat. We can't do everything, but some of them. We are hoping that over the summer we can do another beta testing in another setting, if that's possible. So and then we will refine the tools based on that, and then we will have a final, as it were, a package ready. That can also be made available for non-UN. There's no problem with that, but we haven't found out how that would work quite yet. We have to finish the work itself first. I feel that maybe that's because the people who participate in the workshops are maybe a little bit like-minded or open to these sort of new ideas I've found, but also we have also interviewed very senior level people, former DSRSGs, D2s, who have given us very good and constructive feedback on the things that we were suggesting. But I am hoping that this sort of and also all the work that we can hear this week. I mean, Mary, maybe I've been following these behavioral science weeks over the years, and we have really moved from behavioral science 101, let's get an expert in to tell us what it's about, to hearing about how the UN itself is really picking up all of this work, and the great work that you're doing, Mary, who's also here with us with the practical guidance, with the SG's note, and it's in our common agenda. There's a big push on this, and I think that, so I'm hopeful that there will be an uptick. And once we get going with these things in the field, absolutely, these things should be adopted and changed based on the context and the experience from people. So that bottom-up approach that one of the questions was all about, so we can change it, right? So one tool might work one way in one context, and another tool might work in another way in another context. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it meant to be adapted because even though we are saying we're developing tools that should be useful for integration writ large, no context is the same, neither in the field, nor Christopher is suggesting we use this at headquarters. I think that's great, but there might be an adaptation that's needed for headquarters that doesn't work with the way it's set up now. So so while they're final, it will be a continuous iterative process, I feel, and hopefully that's gonna increase the uptake. I mean, I'm hoping if we can make work easier for people, that is something that people want to do more of, make all these things easier, because our traditional approach is why aren't you just doing what we are telling you? We wrote it in a policy, now go ahead and go do it. And people say, yeah, but I also have this, I have that, I have this, and there is another priority, and now either way there is an emergency or something else that comes up. So really, how do you expect me to do all of this work? So the point is to try and make these things easier. That was I hope I have addressed most of the questions that I could see here. If there's any others on the call who wants to volunteer for trying these things out, please let us know. We'll be happy to do that. It's all about doing this together. Okay. I feel we have answered the questions that have been posed so far. This is the final webinar of this amazing week. I know the timing is okay for New York, Friday afternoon, maybe not ideal, but for most of the settings that we really want that this is most relevant for, they are in a time zone they are already celebrating the weekend. Some have celebrated the weekend all day, but I'm hoping that there will be a pickup also on the YouTube channel where these things will be available. Anyway, what I wanted to do is to give Mary, who is really the chief architect of this whole week and of all the work that's been pushing through on behavioral science in the UN, which is an amazing feat. Give Mary a chance just to come in here at the end to close the week off. Actually, I'll close this session off and say thank you to the panel, to Ayaka, to Ideas 42. We'll continue to work together. Thank you, Jordan, for being ready to step in and provide some of your views as the chief architect of the whole integration review and implementation of the recommendations. Mary, do you want to close the week off? I'm gonna over to you. I can't put the camera on for you, but please do take the floor.
That's okay, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some remarks at the end of UN Behavioral Science Week, and thank you and to all the colleagues from IACA, to Michael Ryan, to Ideas 42 for joining us for the session today. So to say as well, this week was led by myself alongside my colleague Johanna Joachim, who runs the UN Innovation Network more broadly. So definitely want to give her credit too for all of this work, and all of the 18 entities who participate in this. So it's not us, we coordinated. It is very much a UN initiative, and all of you, your effort is what made it what it is. So the 18 entities came together in 21 sessions. And as mentioned, the recordings are on that YouTube link that I shared previously. I will also share in the chat here some of the documents that Ayaka alluded to, the Secretary General's guidance note, as well as the practitioner's guide, which Michael alluded to as well, and a few other resources there. So you can check out some of the broader UN behavioral science work that's been ongoing. As well, if I can do a quick plug for the UN Behavioral Science Group at the end of the session today. So the group is over 1,000 colleagues across the UN. So as Michael mentioned, this is growing across the UN system, more from just the talk with Professor like Cass Sunstein to we've gone on much further and beyond from those early days. So the group is over 1,000 UN colleagues from over 60 entities in 110 countries. And we bring colleagues together within the UN system and outside, as well as provide thought leadership and light touch technical support. So colleagues in the group range from those who are new to behavioral science through to those who are more experienced. So no matter where you are along that spectrum, there's a space for you. You click on the link in that link tree that I put there, you can join the group and keep up to date on what we're doing. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us at the link there, and we'll be happy to answer those. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited about this week. It's the biggest and I think best one in many ways that we've had in the UN system. And we are very excited to see where things go from here. So with that, thank you very much again for this session on integration, and looking forward to engaging with all of you in further sessions. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for all the work, and it's been an amazing week. Thank you, participants. Let's round it off here. Thank you, Ideas 42. Thank you, Ayaka, and have a wonderful weekend if you haven't already started that yet. Bye bye.